Sigourney, about the Sigourney IA Airport. Robert W. Hanlon opened the Sigourney Airport in 1946. Use of the field before the airport was a horse racetrack. Henry Wilkening was one of the racing men. Along with that use, the bakehouses broke horses to drive, hitched to a low-wheeled wagon or wood rack. Charles and Ole Ryder assisted in the braking. The bakehouses bought the farm in 1890. 1947, we, Glenn Ruby and Nellie Ruby, rented the airport land from Henry Bakehouse. We lived on the farm of Billy Bakehouse nearby. Joe Bakehouse, brother of Hank and Billy, spent much time. Two 1947 Piper J3 Cubs, N78406 and N78409 were flown in from Ponca City, Oklahoma, to Sigourney IA Airport by Robert W. Hanlon, Sigourney, and Orville W. Smith, Beacon, Iowa, arriving April the 4th, 1947. L.C. Ruby, New Sharon, and Glenn Ruby drove the pilots to Ponca City, Oklahoma, and we returned by car.
Okay, I'm Bob Hanlon, Sigourney, Iowa, and in 1946, shortly after getting out of the United States Navy as a pilot, I purchased a small plane in Clinton, Iowa, and brought it to Sigourney. For the first 2 or 3 weeks, I left it parked on a field right south of the Catholic Church, about 2 or 3 blocks and a couple of blocks east, and then I moved out to the present airport, which is owned by Henry Bakehouse. The Bakehouse has been friends of our family for years, and I left the plane out there. I used it primarily to fly back and forth to college, and then along, I don't know exactly when it was, Glenn. It was along about the spring or summer of '47, wasn't it?
Well, it was in February of '47.
February 47, you came along and wanted to run the airport. And I said, it's not mine, I'll introduce you to the owners. And Glenn met Hank and Billy Bakehouse, and who were brothers. And really it was Hank Bakehouse that owned this particular land. And Glenn and Nellie have been there ever since. And that's about the history of me being out at the airport. And now I come back. Now I still fly a little bit out there. Since I retired from the Federal Aviation Administration, I come back and give a few flight tests using Glenn and Ellie's facilities.
Well, I came in, stopped February of '47. I was on the way through from, I lived at Knoxville that time. I was going to Washington to see what they had in the way of an airport. Stopped at the oil station here in Sigourney, and Julius Graber says, told me who had the plane out there and what that had better call Bob here, and so I called him up, and Bob says, I'll introduce you to the people that own the land, and that he didn't think that he was so busy then that he didn't know how far he was going to go with it, and with the airport, and they thought maybe it'd be a good idea if I started in. So I talked with Henry Bakehouse, and we wasn't long till they decided it was just the thing. Before we had the airports there, it was a racetrack. They raced driving horses. Race horses to a cart, and they also used that ground as break horses, and they hitched these horses to low-wheeled wagon, which is they call them a wood rack. Somebody would drive and somebody would lead these horses to break them, and those that worked with that, helping Henry and Billy Bakehouse, was Ole Ryder and his brother, and I can't think just what his name was now, his first name was, but the Ryder boys helped the Bakehouse break horses down there.
That was before my time, because I don't ever remember that at all. And Ole's a little bit older than I am. That was before both Glenn and I were around, a long time before.
Yeah, that was that brother's name was Charles Ryder. And so they, that's always been, that location has always been considerable activity there. And also during the course of the airport about 20 years ago, we had a 5-ring circus in there. So it's just kind of a entertaining part of the county or the area.
Do you ever have any idea, Glenn, how many people learn to fly out there?
No, a lot of them, but I couldn't tell you how many.
I don't know who all was instructors. Of course, Nellie taught probably more than anybody else out there to fly, didn't she?
Nellie taught 8 years.
Yeah.
Taught people to fly, and she's pretty busy while she's at that. Well, my brother and I took Robert and another pilot, and my youngest brother-in-law, Dale Voss from Pella, and my brother and I drove him to Ponca City, and we had probably the 2nd of April, '47, and we drove him down there, and I think it's about, the first 2 planes came in here in April the 4th in '47, and that's when my part of the operation started.
You had a little Piper dealership in those days,
yes.
And what's the name of the fellow from Oskaloosa? Went down with me?
Orville Smith.
Yeah, Orville Smith and I went down and flew back there. I remember, I still remember that flight because everything was flooded in Kansas, half the airports, and we finally stayed at a little FAA auxiliary field. It's no longer in existence, at Lebo, Kansas. We stayed there that night, and the next day we went on to Topeka and come back. Well, we stayed another night. We stayed another night in Trenton, Missouri, before we finally come back. And ordinarily, you get down there and back and come back easily in one day, but it was kind of bum weather. The VFR, but just airports were few and far between and were available to use. But that was, like Glenn said, that was the first 2 airplanes that come in here in more or less of a commercial operation.
Back to the amount of the flooded area.
It's amazing in a small town like this, but I imagine an awful lot of the people around here took their first time in the air right out there at Sigourney Airport since you were there. Because I really didn't do much with it except use planes back and forth to college when I was there. And Glenn developed it and made a good runway out of it. And in fact, there's 2 good runways. One used most of the time, it's pretty long, and the other one is good enough for small trainer airplanes, and on days there's a lot of wind blowing, but they're both nice smooth runways, about as smooth as you'll find any place.
Well, back in the 60s, early 60s, such, we give free rides to the school children here in the county. So the teachers, I think we wrote to all the teachers, and they could make an appointment and bring their students in, and we'd haul them free of charge. And there's a lot of grown-ups around here now talk about when they was a kid in school, they come out there and got a free airplane ride.
Yeah, that's right.
And all we had to have was a note, a piece of paper signed by their parents that it was okay to ride. So we give a lot of kids quite a bit of entertainment.
Do you remember the story on that 40-horse Taylor crane? Hey, do you think you'll have any changes on the airport coming up that you know of, or it's going to continue as is? Or I know you have a grandson now that's working toward his certificates, who might be able to take over some of these days.
Yeah, we've thought that. That's Glen Ruby #2. He lives in Council Bluffs. He's going to Western Community College there, where he's airframe and power plant licenses, and he's took his airframe test last week, and he's waiting to hear whether he passed that or not. He thought he'd done pretty well on it, but he's already started in on the power plant. I mean, sometime this fall, before he'll get the course completed for the power plant. So I don't know. I told him I'd buy him a place out here. He could bring his girlfriend and come on out. I'd buy him a place he could kind of pinch hit or work in or whatever. And I don't know, but I imagine. And 47 brought in 2 J3s. One J3 was 78406, and the other one was 78409. And they was flown from Ponca City, Oklahoma to Sigourney, Iowa by Robert Hanlon of Sigourney and Orville W. Smith from Beacon, Iowa. And Orville got in April the 4th with the first new airplane. I think Robert got in a day or two later. He'd stopped to see a friend in Kansas City. And I don't know about the son. Well, Orville was the first pilot, one of the first pilots. Bob and Orville was brought the 2 planes in. And Orville, there's a picture of one of the Cubs. I had the hangar just part of the roof on, didn't have any sides on, no ends in. In the back, one of those new Cubs back in that hangar. I got notes on the back side of that, something about it. And the other picture I had was taken of the other side of the hangar, and we had 2 Cubs just sitting there beside it. And I think this was the east end. And we bought it new from Piper Aircraft. Des Moines Flying Service was the distributor. Took delivery April the 3rd, 1947 at Ponca City, Oklahoma. Cubs were shipped 6 to a boxcar, $50 flyaway fee. Take them out of the boxcar and put the wings on and the tail on, and the Cub was ready to go. And Orville flew one of them home on the 4th, and Bob.
Okay, repeat the dates again.
And Orville brought the first one in April the 4th. Both Cubs left Ponca City at the same time, but Robert had to see a service buddy of his in Kansas City, so Robert didn't get in for 2 days later.
Got one place in Missouri that it had rained and covered the airports, and a storm coming up, and we wanted to get them inside.
Oh yeah.
Remember that? You weren't there yet.
No.
But anyway, we landed up as close to town as we could get, and we had to hop a little ditch in order to have enough runway.
I'll be.
Yes, we did. We had to stretch things.
Oh my.
And anyway, we got a hold of a dentist that had an airplane there, and he had his out in the shop getting it worked on. So his shop was empty out on the farm 6 miles south, and so he told us to go out there. And the wind was blowing so hard that the dentist was running alongside of the airplane, and he didn't hardly get started till I was off and going.
Well, I'll be.
Oh, it was blowing.
Oh my.
And when I got out there to his place, the hangar was about 100 feet long, and I set it down on the ground with a little over half of it.
Well, Practically flying backwards.
Pretty well. The reverse was already built in.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then I had to go around the hangar and go back in again. And whenever it got in, he got his, Bob got his in, and we stand there talking and watching it a little bit, and then it cut loose rain and it came.
Oh, my.
It would have tore all the fabric off of it.
Oh, my.
Oh, good hits.
We was wanting in someplace.
Oh, yes.
So that's the only chance we had of getting in is that he had his ship out.
1947.
1947.
Well, my name is Glenn Ruby. And Nellie Ruby, we bought two new airplanes. They shipped them from Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, out to Tulsa,
Ponca City, Oklahoma.
Ponca City, Oklahoma. And Dale Voss here was visiting with us 41 years ago. So Dale's volunteered, run the risk to go along and help get those planes back.
Boy, that was a wild ride.
But I heard later it was ups and downs.
Yes, it was.
Well, who was it went?
Well, one of the pilots was Robert Hanlon from Sigourney, and the other pilot was
Gentleman from Oskaloosa.
from Mr. Smith. What's his first name? Mr. Smith from Beacon.
Cecil?
Horrible, isn't it?
Orville Smith.
Orville Smith from Beacon. And Lawrence Ruby and I and Dale, we drove those pilots to Ponca City. And Dale, well, you take over from there.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, they turned us loose in those airplanes. Well, Glenn made me feel like a big man. He says, "Here, you make sure those guys get back." He gave me a couple of bucks and says, "You pay for the bills." I remember that. But that was in '47 when all those floods, every river from here to Oklahoma was flooded, I think. And the winds were high, and I'll tell you, we took off on that airplane. And, well, I sat there, I think all the way back, sitting like this, and I think I had the paint worn off of those little bars up there by the time we got back here, because that was just up and down and up and down.
It's like riding a Bronco.
I think we flew backwards half the time. Just seemed like it took forever. We stayed 2 nights. We had to land 2 nights on the way back. One night, I know, was in Trenton, Missouri. I remember that. I really don't know where we stopped that first night anymore. I don't remember that. But I know we was hunting for the airport one time along the Missouri River, and we finally found it, and it was underwater. And we were needing gas, so kind of climbed up the hill a little bit and chased some cattle out of the way, and we landed in the pasture. And people at the house there kind of wondered what was going on, and they found us a gas truck and got us gassed up. And
Was that both planes?
I think only one plant. Oh,
The one
I think
you
only
was
one I was with that landed in that pasture. And I am not sure where the other guy landed at.
Well, he 2 days after you got home, 2 days later he showed up.
He showed up. I didn't remember that.
I don't. He didn't call in to tell us where he was at, and we was pretty much worried about him and the plane. But he finally showed up.
Yeah, we were all together at Trenton. We stayed overnight in a rooming house. I remember that. And it was
Years ago.
41 years ago. 16, yeah. 16 years old.
Orville Smith, this summer, we was talking about how old he was. He thought maybe he was about 15.
Yeah.
And at that time, we didn't know who it was that went along. But Marlene, our daughter, said, "It's between you and her who got to go."
I didn't even remember that.
and we decided, you better go, because we didn't know how she could stand the ride.
Oh, boy. It was a bouncy ride, I'll tell you.
Old Smith. We found out later that Robert Hamlin visited one of his Navy buddies, Navy pilots, around down there in Missouri someplace. He stayed for a day or two and waited for the weather to air to smooth out. Well, anyway, you brought 2 nice cubs in.
Now, wasn't too many years ago now that you had pieces of that plane back in there again.
Yeah, we got both of those planes back in later years. A lot of planes that we have, we recycle them. They come back through Sigourney.
There you go.
And then they go out
The
again.
third airplane that we bought, we had all 3 of them together. The first 3 airplanes we ever owned were all there at the same time.
Come back
Come back
years
same time again.
later.
I'll be darned.
Years later.
Yeah. Started another airport down in
Bloomfield.
Bloomfield. I was gonna
Yeah.
say I was gonna say Fairfield. I was thinking for a while.
Bloomfield. We commuted back and forth. Had it down there about 10 years. Generally, Nellie went down on Sundays and hopped passengers and talked to the pilots and so on. I stayed at home base.
Yes, up.
Finally, we sold it to an evangelist. In September, we had a fly-in, all the pilots around. I don't remember whether it was a flight breakfast, but there was a nice presentation of the local planes over. In 1948, I flew the Piper Vagabond, a 1948 plane, over to the Whatcheer Fair, Keokuk County Fair. I landed just east of the fairgrounds. I hauled passengers, so much a hop. One of them was Mr. Zalzal. He was the Piper J3 Cubs we bought and delivered to us in April.
April what?
1947. We didn't have we just put the planes in the hangar at night because we didn't have it done. We thought the dry hangar that we were working on, well, we quit the hangar and built us an office.
Over the years, it took some doing to keep an airport going. So we drove school buses. Now, this is Glenn with one of his former students. We both drove school buses for 19 years, and we had a lot of different things happen over there at the airport. Over the years, we had circuses, we had farm machinery auctions, we had horse shows, and we'll get into a few pictures here a little later on some of these things. This was taken in approximately 58, 59 in the process of building our shop building. And this is, the walls were put up here, already put up. Bill McKegg from Delta laid the walls for us. Applegate, Charlie Applegate, he ordered the steel for the roof and made the A-frame right out there on the grounds. And well, I don't know. Another picture of the building, of the shop, as we're putting it up. The rafters are up. I think that's Glenn up there putting up some more rafter and laying the tin. And that's Marlene, our daughter Marlene Ruby, and Wayne, our son Wayne Ruby, and Joe Kirkove. They're nailing the tin down out there at the airport that made things go. And here's a circus that we had one year back in 65, I believe it was. Malta T hangar, the second set that we built. The first set we just had two T hangars and then some additions onto it. And in '65 we started in with more. The first new hangar we built on this, we built right over the top of the old one. Building, only it shows two stalls on the south side. This is the south side of the building. 2 stalls on the south side. So there'll be 3 stalls on the north side. Myself, Nellie Ruby, Glenn and I had just gotten our A&P licenses to work on these aircraft. After we'd been in the business for 20 years, we finally decided to go to school and get our rating so we could do it and not take them someplace else and have them pay somebody else all the time. And having machinery auctions, here's one we had in 1969. We used to have them about twice a year, spring and the fall. Military fly in there. This was Governor Ray's plane. I think it was about a 421 Cessna. And it was in August of '69. I think it was the 100 years for Sigourney. Also showed our planes in right in Sigourney, downtown Sigourney. I brought Cherokee in on gravel road east of the high school, landed it there, and then taxied it through the streets of Sigourney about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And you should have seen the shades and drapes get raised and pulled, wondering what was going on down their streets. And they open up the shades and drapes and see an airplane taxiing down beside their house. They thought they had it. Hangar that was on the airport there when we went there. This was what Bob Hanlon had for his airplane, although he didn't have any doors on it. After we got there, we bought the hangar off of him and we put doors on it. And here, Tim Glennon, I believe, and Glenn are up on the roof, ready. They're getting ready to dismantle the first hangar that was on that field. And this was back in 72. Lots of RC radio-controlled aircraft fly off of the field, and this was at a fly-in that we had there back in '79 in the fall. Balloons that were there at that RC fly-in, they had just taken off from our airport. Grass is mowed out there toward the left side of the picture, and that's where the RC planes took off. They had a little runway north and south, and they had a little runway east and west. But we had just painted these buildings that fall, and foreigners. I hauled foreigners around over the state. This is 3 people, 2 gentlemen from England, and the lady from Denmark. And they came over here about once a year for several years and bought antiques. That was supposed to do some spraying around there, and they had problems with it. And so Glenn worked on this one. He put the mags on. They went and got new mags, and he put the mags on. So, and this is the day he soloed. And that's his instructor on the left, Rick Gritters. And that was back in '85, and July the 1st of '87, Glennie got his private license, and we're hoping that he will take over for us someday. Well, since we started this, we found a lot of things that we weren't prepared to talk about, and in the meantime I have put down a few things that I thought might be of interest. Glenn got his private license back in March of 1948. And I got my private license in August of 1948. And in 1963 I got my commercial, and in 1965 I got my flight instructor's rating. Then in 1967, Glenn and I both got our mechanics rating, aircraft and power plant. And in 1976 I got my authorized inspector's rating. And I'm the only lady in the state of Iowa that has an aircraft and power plant rating and an inspector's authorization. Our children, Marlene, she got her private license in '58, and she got her commercial license in '61, and Bus just ended up with a student license. He did a little flying for us on his student ticket, but not too much. And in 1964, we sold 54 airplanes. That averages over one a week for the year. That's the most we had sold in 1 year. We've sold planes to Alaska, to Canada, and we've licensed planes. Planes have to come in once a year for what we call an annual inspection. We go over them from head to toe. And we've had them come from Alaska and from Arizona just for us to license their airplanes. Well, that's what they say. We think they were here also to do some visiting and so on, but then they did it at a time when we could do the annual for them. And I guess that's about the size of it.